I'm Vanessa Hartley, and I was standing in my kitchen slicing apples for after-school snacks when my sister Bridget sent me a photo. Pink balloons spelling out "Baby Number 5" filled the screen. My hands stopped mid-slice. 4 kids already lived under my roof most nights of the week, their shoes cluttering my entryway, their laughter filling rooms I used to keep quiet. And now she wanted to add another. The knife clattered against the cutting board as I read her caption, "Surprise. Guess who's getting more practice at auntie duty?" That's when I knew something had to break, and it wasn't going to be me this time. Ever feel like you've been carrying someone else's life on your back so long you forgot what your own shoulders felt like without the weight? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years ago, Bridget had knocked on my door at 11 at night holding Cody's hand while Sienna wailed in her arms. Troy had been arrested for a DUI, she'd explained through tears, and she needed just one night to sort things out. One night became a weekend. The weekend stretched into a month. Then 2 months. Then Cody started asking if my guest room was officially his bedroom now, and I didn't have the heart to correct him. Parker arrived the following summer during what Bridget called her spiritual awakening phase, which mostly involved her staying at a yoga retreat in Oregon for 6 weeks while I juggled 3 children and a full-time teaching job. Mila came along during the pandemic when Bridget decided remote salon work wasn't for her and moved in with a musician who lived in a converted van. She dropped Mila off with a diaper bag and a promise to return by Wednesday. That was 16 months ago. I stared at the photo on my phone, pink balloons mocking me through the screen. My coffee had gone cold in the mug beside the cutting board. Rain drummed against the kitchen window, the kind of steady Tacoma drizzle that makes everything feel heavier. The apples I'd been slicing were for Cody's lunchbox because he refused to eat the cafeteria fruit, said it tasted like wet paper. Sienna needed her ballet shoes washed before tomorrow's recital. Parker had a dentist appointment I'd scheduled 3 months in advance because his back molar had been bothering him. Mila's preschool tuition was due Friday, and I'd already moved money from my savings account twice this month to cover groceries. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voice message. Bridget's voice poured out bright and bubbly like she was announcing a surprise party instead of a 5th child she had no intention of raising. "Vanny. Oh my God, can you believe it? Troy and I are so excited. I know things have been a little crazy, but this baby is going to change everything. We're finally getting our act together. For real this time. Anyway, I'll swing by next week to grab some of the kids' stuff. Love you." I set the phone down carefully, the way you'd place a fragile ornament back on a shelf after nearly dropping it. Grabbed some of the kids' stuff. Not the kids themselves. Just their stuff. As if the children were interchangeable with the bags of hand-me-down clothes and mismatched toys she'd been leaving behind piece by piece. I looked around my kitchen. Cody's spelling homework sat on the table, half-finished, his pencil still resting in the margin where he'd gotten frustrated with the word "necessary." Sienna's glitter princess crown hung from the back of a chair. Parker's collection of smooth river stones lined the windowsill, each one carefully selected from our walks through Wright Park. Mila's sippy cup sat in the dish rack, the one with the purple lid she refused to drink from any other cup. These weren't just objects. They were proof of a life I hadn't planned but had somehow built anyway. And now Bridget wanted to add another child to the pile, another mouth to feed, another set of needs I'd be expected to meet while she floated through life untethered by consequence or responsibility. I felt something harden in my chest, not anger exactly, but a kind of clarity I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. I'd been so focused on keeping everyone afloat that I'd never stopped to ask why I was the only one swimming. The front door banged open, and Cody trudged in, backpack dragging behind him. His hair stuck up in wild tufts from the rain, and his sneakers squeaked against the hardwood. "Aunt Vanessa, guess what? I got an A on my book report." He held up a crumpled paper, pride radiating from his grin. Sienna followed close behind, chattering about how her friend Leah had stolen her purple marker during art class. Parker trailed in last, dragging a stick he'd found on the walk home, leaving a wet streak across the floor. I smiled at them, the kind of smile that takes effort when your mind is somewhere else entirely. "That's amazing, Cody. I'm so proud of you." I pulled him into a quick hug, felt the dampness of his jacket against my shirt. "Why don't you guys get changed, and we'll have snacks in a bit?" They scattered toward their rooms, voices echoing down the hallway, and I was alone again with Bridget's message still glowing on my phone screen. I replayed it once more, listening to the ease in her voice, the assumption that I'd just keep going, keep absorbing, keep sacrificing. There was no question in her tone, no request for permission. Just an announcement delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. I thought about calling her back immediately, letting the words spill out hot and unfiltered. But I'd learned over the years that confronting Bridget in the moment never worked. She had a way of twisting things, of making me feel guilty for even suggesting she wasn't doing enough. She'd cry, she'd apologize, she'd promise to do better, and then a week later, nothing would change. The pattern was so familiar I could script it in my sleep. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled to Aunt Lorraine's contact. She was my mother's younger sister, the one person in our family who'd always had a spine when it came to Bridget's chaos. She'd been the one to tell Bridget she couldn't crash at her place after the van musician phase ended. She'd been the one to refuse to co-sign a loan Bridget wanted for a business idea that never materialized. And she'd been the one to quietly slip me checks when she knew I was stretched too thin, never making a big deal out of it, just leaving envelopes in my mailbox with notes that said, "For the kids." Lorraine answered on the second ring. "Let me guess. She's pregnant again." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "How did you know?" "Because she called me yesterday fishing for congratulations, and I could hear it in her voice. That same tone she uses when she wants everyone to celebrate her choices while ignoring the fallout." Lorraine's voice was steady, the kind of calm that comes from decades of dealing with family dysfunction without losing yourself in it. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. "But I can't keep doing this. I can't raise another one of her kids, Lorraine. I'm tapped out. Emotionally, financially, all of it." There was a pause on the other end, the sound of Lorraine setting something down, maybe a cup or a book. "Then don't. You've already done more than anyone should ever be expected to do. Those kids love you, Vanessa. You've given them stability Bridget never could. But that doesn't mean you're obligated to keep signing up for her mistakes." "She'll make me the villain," I said quietly. "She'll tell everyone I abandoned her, that I turned my back on family." "Let her," Lorraine replied, and there was steel in her voice now. "Because the truth is, she's the one who abandoned her kids. You've been cleaning up her mess for years, and she's never once thanked you for it. Never once offered to take them back full-time. Never once asked if you were okay. So if she wants to paint you as the villain, let her try. The people who matter know the truth." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, not from sadness but from relief. Relief that someone else saw it. That I wasn't crazy for feeling suffocated. That my exhaustion was justified. "I think I need to make this official," I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke. "I need to get legal custody of the kids. Not just keep letting her drop them off whenever it's convenient. Actual custody." Lorraine was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I think that's the right move. And I think you need to do it before this new baby arrives, because once that happens, she's going to spiral again, and those kids will be caught in the middle." We talked for another 20 minutes, Lorraine helping me map out what I needed to do. Contact a family lawyer. Document everything. Every missed pickup, every broken promise, every time Bridget had chosen convenience over her children. I'd kept some of it, old text messages where she'd said she'd be back in a few days and then disappeared for months. Voicemails where she'd asked me to keep the kids just a little longer. Emails from their schools listing me as the primary contact because Bridget never answered her phone. By the time we hung up, I had a plan. It wasn't fully formed yet, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was moving towards something instead of just treading water. That evening, after the kids were fed and bathed and tucked into their beds, I sat at my laptop in the quiet of my living room. The house smelled faintly of the lavender laundry detergent I used on their sheets, and the rain had finally stopped, leaving the neighborhood still and damp. I opened a blank document and started typing. Every instance I could remember. Every time Bridget had left the kids with me for longer than planned. Every birthday she'd missed, every school event she'd skipped, every promise she'd broken. The list grew longer than I expected. Pages and pages of small moments that added up to a pattern so undeniable I wondered how I'd ever convinced myself it was temporary. Cody's 4th birthday when she'd promised to throw him a party and then called 2 hours before to say she couldn't make it. Sienna's first dance recital when I'd been the only adult in the audience clapping for her. Parker's trip to the emergency room for a broken arm when I'd been the one holding his hand during the x-rays because Bridget's phone went straight to voicemail. Mila's first word, which had been Nessa, instead of a mama, because I was the one who'd been there every single day. I saved the document, backed it up to the cloud, and emailed it to myself for good measure. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Then I searched for family lawyers in Tacoma, scrolling through reviews and credentials until I found one that specialized in custody cases. Gerald Pineda. His office was downtown, and his website showed a kind face and testimonials from clients who'd navigated messy family situations. I filled out the contact form, laying out the basics of my situation, and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. Down the hall, I could hear Parker's soft snoring, the rhythmic sound of a child who felt safe enough to sleep deeply. In the room next to his, Sienna's nightlight cast a faint glow under the door. Cody had started sleeping without a nightlight last year, declaring himself too old for it, but I'd noticed he still kept a flashlight under his pillow just in case. These kids had become mine in every way that mattered. I'd been the one to teach Cody how to tie his shoes. I'd been the one to braid Sienna's hair every morning before school. I'd been the one to comfort Parker through nightmares about monsters under the bed. I'd been the one to rock Mila to sleep when she cried for a mother who wasn't coming back anytime soon. And now I had to make it official, not because I wanted to take them away from Bridget, but because someone had to protect them from the chaos she kept creating. The next morning, I woke to an email from Gerald Pineda's office. They had an opening that afternoon if I could make it. I replied yes before I'd even had my coffee, and spent the rest of the morning moving through the motions of getting the kids ready for school and daycare. Cody noticed I was distracted, asked if I was okay while I packed his lunch. I ruffled his hair and told him I was fine, just thinking about grown-up stuff. He accepted that answer the way kids do, with a shrug and a return to his own world of spelling tests and recess games. At 2 o'clock, I walked into Gerald Pineda's office on the 5th floor of a building overlooking Commencement Bay. The waiting room was calm, decorated in soft blues and grays, with a coffee station in the corner and magazines I had no interest in reading. A receptionist greeted me warmly and let me know Mr. Pineda would be with me shortly. I sat, hands folded in my lap, and watched the rain start up again outside the window. When Gerald Pineda stepped out to greet me, he was exactly as his website photo suggested. Mid-50s, glasses perched on his nose, an easy smile that put me at ease immediately. We shook hands, and he led me into his office, which smelled faintly of coffee and old books. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, clutching the folder I'd brought with me containing printouts of everything I'd documented the night before. "So, Vanessa," he began, settling into his chair across from me. "Tell me what's going on." And I did. I told him everything. About Bridget's pattern of leaving the kids with me. About Troy's arrest and the yoga retreat and the van musician and all the times she'd promised to come back and hadn't. I told him about the new pregnancy, about the casual way she'd announced it like it was just another fun life update. I told him about the toll it had taken on me, the financial strain, the emotional exhaustion, the way I'd put my own life on hold to make sure these kids had stability. Gerald listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and regarded me thoughtfully. "What you're describing is abandonment," he said plainly. Your sister has effectively relinquished care of her children to you without formalizing it legally. That puts you in a vulnerable position, because technically, she still has parental rights. She could walk in tomorrow and take those kids back, and you'd have no legal standing to stop her. My stomach dropped. I'd known that on some level, but hearing it said out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. So what do I do? You file for guardianship, he said. Given the circumstances, it's likely a judge would grant it. You have documentation, you've been the primary caregiver, and the children are clearly thriving in your care. The question is whether your sister will contest it. She will, I said immediately. Not because she wants them back, but because she'll see it as me trying to control her. She'll make it about her, not them. Gerald nodded. That's common in these cases. But here's the thing. The court's primary concern is the welfare of the children, not the feelings of the parents. If she contests and it goes to a hearing, we present the evidence. The missed pickups, the broken promises, the instability. We show that you've been the constant in their lives. And we make the case that formalizing guardianship is in their best interest. He walked me through the process. The paperwork I'd need to file. The timeline, which could take several months depending on whether Bridget fought it. The possibility of mediation, though he doubted she'd agree to it. He also mentioned that if Bridget was pregnant again and showed no signs of changing her pattern, that could actually work in my favor. It would demonstrate to the court that she wasn't planning to resume full-time care of the children she already had. By the time I left his office an hour later, I had a stack of documents to fill out and a plan of action. It felt surreal, like I was setting something in motion that couldn't be undone. But underneath the nerves was a sense of rightness, a certainty that this was what needed to happen. Not for me, but for Cody and Sienna and Parker and Mila. They deserved to know where they'd be sleeping at night. They deserved to not wonder when their mom would show up or if she'd disappear again. They deserved stability, and I was the only one willing to give it to them. I drove home through streets slick with rain, wipers beating a rhythm that matched my pulse. The paperwork Gerald had given me sat in a manila envelope on the passenger seat, heavy with possibility and consequence. I thought about stopping for coffee, something to steady my nerves, but the clock on my dashboard reminded me I had 30 minutes before I needed to pick up Mila from daycare. Time moved differently now, measured in pickup schedules and bedtime routines rather than my own wants or needs. The house felt emptier when I walked in alone. No scatter of shoes by the door, no cartoon voices drifting from the living room, just the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of the kitchen faucet I kept meaning to fix. I set the envelope on the dining table and stood there staring at it like it might combust if I looked away. This was real. I was actually going to do this. File legal paperwork against my own sister. Turn a family disagreement into a court case. The weight of it pressed against my ribs. My phone buzzed. A text from Bridget. Can you grab diapers for Mila? Running low and I'm swamped today. No mention of the pregnancy announcement. No acknowledgement that she'd just casually informed me I'd be caring for a fifth child. Just a request for diapers, as if I were a personal assistant rather than the woman raising her children. I typed back a simple, okay, and deleted 3 other responses that would have started a fight I wasn't ready to have yet. At the grocery store, I found myself standing in the baby aisle longer than necessary. Diapers for Mila, size 4. I grabbed 2 packs because one never lasted as long as it should. Then my eyes drifted to the newborn section. Tiny diapers, soft wipes, bottles in pastel colors. In a few months, Bridget would have another baby. Another small person who needed everything. And she'd probably show up at my door with that same helpless expression she always wore, asking for just a little help, just until she got back on her feet. But this time I wouldn't be there to catch her. The thought should have brought relief, but instead it sat heavy in my stomach like swallowed stones. What would happen to that baby? Would Troy actually step up, or would he disappear like he had with the others? Would Bridget find someone else to dump her responsibilities on, or would she finally be forced to face what she'd created? I paid for the diapers and drove to Little Explorers Daycare, a cheerful yellow building tucked between a laundromat and a tax preparation office. Mila's face lit up when she saw me through the window, and she came running with her coat half on, dragging her tiny backpack behind her. She crashed into my legs with the full force of a 3-year-old who'd missed me desperately despite only being apart for 5 hours. Nessa. We made snakes today with Play-Doh. She held up a crumpled paper with something vaguely serpentine drawn in green crayon. Mine is named Frederick. Frederick is very handsome, I said, buckling her into her car seat. She chattered the entire drive home about Frederick and her friend Mason who'd eaten paste and Miss Kelly who'd read them a story about a bear. I made the appropriate sounds of interest while my mind churned through everything Gerald had told me. Guardianship hearings. Evidence documentation. Character witnesses. The machinery of legal process grinding toward a resolution I both needed and dreaded. Back home, I settled Mila with a snack while I started dinner. Spaghetti, simple and reliable, the kind of meal I could make without thinking. The water was just starting to boil when I heard the front door open and Cody's voice calling out. "Aunt Vanessa? You home?" "Kitchen," I called back, and moments later all 3 older kids tumbled in. Sienna immediately launched into a detailed complaint about her teacher giving them too much homework. Parker announced he'd found a salamander during recess and was devastated he couldn't bring it home. Cody quietly set his backpack down and started pulling out papers to show me, a math test with a gold star, a permission slip for a field trip to the science center. This was my life now. Had been for years, really. The daily rhythm of other people's needs, the constant motion of keeping small humans alive and reasonably happy. I'd built something here without meaning to, a makeshift family held together by routine and necessity. And Bridget kept threatening to dismantle it with her chaos. After dinner, while the kids did homework at the kitchen table and Mila colored in her coloring book, I excused myself to my bedroom and pulled out the envelope Gerald had given me. The first form was straightforward enough. Petition for temporary guardianship. My information, the children's information, the reasons I was seeking guardianship. I started filling it out with a pen, then stopped. My handwriting looked shaky, uncertain. I switched to typing it on my laptop instead, each answer carefully worded. The second form asked for detailed documentation of why guardianship was necessary. I opened the document I'd created the night before and began transferring information, organizing it chronologically. January 15th, Bridget dropped off Cody and Sienna for a few days, while she handled a work situation. She returned 6 weeks later. March 3rd, Parker developed a fever and needed to see a doctor. I couldn't reach Bridget for 3 days to get insurance information. May 22nd, Sienna's school called about a parent-teacher conference. They'd been trying to reach Bridget for 2 months. I attended instead. The list went on. Page after page of small abandonments that accumulated into something undeniable. I'd kept more records than I realized. Text messages saved in a folder on my phone. Emails printed and filed away. Even a few voicemails I'd never deleted, Bridget's voice promising to pick up the kids on Sunday, on Wednesday, next week for sure. A soft knock on my bedroom door interrupted me. Cody poked his head in, his expression uncertain. "Can I ask you something?" I closed my laptop. "Of course, buddy. Come sit." He perched on the edge of my bed, picking at a loose thread on the comforter. "Is my mom coming to get us soon?" The question landed like a punch. How did you explain to a 9-year-old that his mother probably wasn't coming back, at least not in any meaningful way? That she loved the idea of her children more than she loved the actual work of raising them? Why do you ask? He shrugged, still not looking at me. Some kids at school were talking about Mother's Day. It's coming up. And I just wondered if we'd be with her or with you. Mother's Day. I'd forgotten it was approaching. Another holiday I'd navigate alone while Bridget posted heartfelt messages on social media about how much she loved her babies. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But wherever you are, you'll be somewhere safe. I promise. I like it here, Cody said quietly. I mean, I love my mom. But I like it here with you. It's just easier. I always know what's going to happen next. My throat tightened. I like having you here too. All of you. He finally looked up at me, his eyes so much older than 9. Are you going to make us leave? Never, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. You're not going anywhere unless you want to. He nodded, satisfied with that answer, and left to finish his homework. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the closed door. That conversation had just made everything clearer. These kids needed certainty, not chaos. They needed to know they had a home, not just a temporary landing pad between their mother's crises. I opened my laptop again and continued filling out forms. This time my fingers moved faster, more certain. By the time I finished, it was past 10 and the house had gone quiet. I crept down the hallway, checking on each child. Mila sprawled across her toddler bed, covers kicked off, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Parker curled up tight, his collection of smooth stones arranged on his nightstand. Sienna slept with one arm flung over her head, her ballet shoes hung carefully on a hook. Cody's room was dark except for the glow of his nightlight shaped like a rocket ship, the one he claimed he didn't need but never turned off. I gathered the completed forms and slid them back into the envelope. Tomorrow I'd go to the courthouse during my lunch break and file them. Set the legal machinery in motion. There was no going back after that. Bridget would be served with papers, she'd explode, she'd call me every name she could think of. Our relationship, already strained past recognition, would probably shatter completely. But standing there in the dim hallway of my home, listening to the peaceful breathing of 4 children who depended on me, I knew I was making the right choice. This wasn't about punishing Bridget or claiming her kids as mine. This was about protecting them from a mother who loved them in theory but abandoned them in practice. About giving them the stability they deserved. Sleep came easier that night than it had in months. I'd expected to lie awake wrestling with guilt or doubt, but instead I felt calm. Resolved. The decision had been made, and everything that came next was just following through. Morning arrived with its usual chaos. Breakfast negotiations, lost homework, Mila refusing to wear anything except her princess dress. I navigated it all on autopilot, my mind already at the courthouse, imagining myself handing over the envelope that would change everything. The kids sensed nothing different. To them, this was just another Tuesday. Cereal and cartoons and backpack checks. I dropped Mila at daycare, waved at Miss Kelly through the window. Drove the older kids to Lowell Elementary, watched them join the stream of children flowing through the front doors. Cody turned back once to wave at me, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Then I pointed my car toward downtown Tacoma, toward the courthouse that loomed gray and imposing against the cloudy sky. Parking was a nightmare, as always. I circled 3 blocks before finding a spot 2 streets over. The walk gave me time to rehearse what I'd say if anyone asked questions. I'm filing for guardianship of my nieces and nephews. Simple. Straightforward. No need to explain the years of history that had led to this moment. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and old paper. Security waved me through after checking my bag. A directory pointed me toward family court on the 3rd floor. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, needing the extra minutes to steady myself. My footsteps echoed in the stairwell, each step carrying me closer to a point of no return. The family court clerk's office was small and cramped, 3 windows with bored-looking employees behind plexiglass. I approached the one marked guardianship petitions, and slid my envelope through the slot. The clerk, a woman with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain, opened it and began reviewing the forms with practiced efficiency. "You'll need to pay the filing fee," she said without looking up. $217. I pulled out my credit card, the same one I'd been using to buy groceries and school supplies and everything else the kids needed. Another charge to add to the growing balance. The clerk processed it, stamped several pages, and handed me a receipt along with copies of what I'd filed. "The court will review your petition and set a hearing date. You should receive notice by mail within 3 weeks. Service of process will be arranged for all interested parties." Her tone was perfectly neutral, as if she had no idea she was handing me a bomb that would explode my family. Thank you, I managed, taking the papers with hands that had started to shake. Outside, the rain had picked up again. I sat in my car for a long time, engine running but not moving, just watching water stream down the windshield. It was done. Filed. Official. Somewhere in that building, a judge would eventually review my petition and decide whether I had the right to keep raising my sister's children. Whether the evidence I'd gathered was enough to prove what I knew in my bones to be true. My phone rang. Aunt Lorraine. I answered, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. I just filed. Good, she said firmly. How are you holding up? I don't know yet. Ask me again when Bridget finds out. She's going to lose her mind, Lorraine said, not unkindly. But you did the right thing. Those kids need you to be strong, and you are. We talked for a few more minutes, Lorraine asking about the process and timeline. She offered to come with me to the hearing when it was scheduled, to sit in the gallery as support. I accepted gratefully. When we hung up, I finally put the car in gear and drove toward the elementary school where I worked, already 10 minutes late for my afternoon art classes. The kids in my second grade class were working on watercolor landscapes, their paintings bleeding together in enthusiastic puddles of color. I moved between tables, offering encouragement and technique tips, but part of my mind remained at the courthouse. The forms I'd filed were making their way through bureaucratic channels. Soon a process server would show up wherever Bridget was living now, hand her official papers, and she'd know what I'd done. After school, I picked up the kids in my usual rotation. Mila first, then Cody and Sienna and Parker. They piled into my car with their standard complaints and stories, fighting over who got to pick the radio station. Parker wanted the rock station, Sienna insisted on pop music, Cody voted for NPR because he liked feeling grown up. I let them argue while I drove, their voices washing over me like familiar music. At home, I made chicken nuggets and carrot sticks, supervised homework, refereed an argument about whose turn it was to pick the evening movie. Normal life continuing around the earthquake I'd triggered. The kids had no idea that their entire future had just been placed in the hands of a judge they'd never meet. Bedtime came as a relief. Stories read, teeth brushed, night lights adjusted. By 8:30 they were all settled, and I collapsed on the couch with a glass of wine I rarely allowed myself on weeknights. The house felt different now, charged with anticipation. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. It took 4 days. 4 days of checking my phone obsessively, jumping at every notification. 4 days of second-guessing myself while simultaneously knowing I'd done the only thing possible. 4 days of the kids asking why I seemed distracted. Then my phone exploded with texts from Bridget. 17 messages in rapid succession, each one escalating in anger and hurt. The first one just said, "What did you do?" The second demanded I call her immediately. By the 10th she was threatening to call the police. By the 15th she was crying through her words, claiming I'd betrayed her, stolen her children, destroyed their family. I didn't respond right away. Gerald had warned me this would happen, had advised me to keep communication minimal and factual. Document everything, he'd said. Don't engage emotionally. Let her vent and save the evidence. So I screenshot every message. Saved them to a folder on my laptop clearly labeled Guardianship Case Evidence. Added them to the timeline I'd been building. Then I typed out a single response: "The kids are safe and cared for. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the hearing." Bridget showed up at my door 3 hours later. I heard her car screech into the driveway, the door slam, her footsteps pounding up the walkway. She didn't knock. She used the key I'd forgotten she still had, bursting into my living room like a storm that had been gathering strength for days. Her face was blotchy from crying, her hair wild, and she was still wearing pajama pants with a jacket thrown over them. "You can't do this," she said, her voice cracking. "You can't just take my kids." I stood up from the couch, keeping my expression neutral even though my heart was hammering. "I'm not taking them. I'm making official what's already been happening for 3 years. That's bullshit and you know it." She moved closer, jabbing a finger toward my chest. This is about control. You've always been jealous that I had kids and you couldn't, so now you're trying to steal mine. The words hit like a slap, designed to wound in the way only family knows how. She was referring to the miscarriage I'd had 5 years ago, the one that had ended my marriage and left me certain I'd never be a mother. She'd known about it, had even sent flowers to the hospital. And now she was weaponizing it. This has nothing to do with that, I said quietly, refusing to take the bait. This is about 4 children who need stability. Who need to know where they're sleeping at night and who's going to show up for them. I show up, Bridget insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm their mother. I've always been their mother. Being a mother is more than biology, I said, my voice getting harder. It's being there for doctor's appointments and parent-teacher conferences. It's knowing what size shoes they wear and what foods they'll actually eat. It's showing up on their birthdays instead of texting an apology from 3 states away. She flinched, and for a moment I saw something like shame flicker across her face. But it vanished quickly, replaced by fresh anger. You don't understand. You've never understood. It's hard being a single mom. Troy's useless, I don't have help, I'm doing the best I can. Your best isn't enough, I said, and the truth of it hung between us. And that's okay, Bridget. You don't have to be perfect. But you do have to be present, and you're not. You haven't been for years. So your solution is to get lawyers involved? To drag me to court like I'm some kind of criminal? Her voice rose high enough that I worried about waking the kids. Do you know how humiliating this is? The process server showed up at work. In front of everyone. I'm sorry about that, I said, meaning it. But this isn't about humiliating you. It's about protecting them. From me? She laughed, a bitter sound. You're acting like I'm some kind of monster. Like I don't love my own children. I know you love them, I said gently. But love isn't enough when they need someone to pack their lunches and help with homework and hold them when they're scared. You keep saying you're going to get it together, that things are going to change, but they never do. And now you're having another baby. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, a protective gesture. This baby is different. Troy and I are different now. We're getting married. You've been saying versions of that for years, I said tiredly. After Mila was born, you said the van thing was temporary. Before that, you said the yoga retreat was going to help you find balance. And before that, you said Troy's arrest was a wake-up call. But nothing changes, Bridget. The kids are still here, with me, and you're still making excuses. She sank onto my couch, deflating like a balloon losing air. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I don't know how to do it. Be the kind of mom you are. The kind that has it all together. I don't have it all together, I said, sitting down in the chair across from her. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm broke. I haven't been on a date in 2 years because I don't have time. But I keep showing up because they need me to. And I don't? The question came out wounded. I chose my words carefully. I think you love the idea of your kids more than you love the reality of raising them. And I think every time things get hard, you find a way to hand them off to someone else. First Mom, before she died. Then Troy's parents until they said no more. Now me. But I can't keep doing it without any legal protection or acknowledgement of what this actually is. Bridget was crying again, quieter now. If you take them, I'll have nothing. They're all I have. You're the one who gave them to me, I said softly. Years ago. You just never made it official. All I'm doing is catching the paperwork up to reality. She wiped her face with her sleeve. What if I promised to do better? Really do better this time? I'd heard that promise so many times it had lost all meaning. The hearing is in 6 weeks. If you want to prove you're capable of being their primary parent, then prove it. Show up. Get a stable job. Find stable housing. Document it. Bring it to court. She looked at me like I'd suggested she climb Everest. 6 weeks? That's impossible. It's what parents do every day, I said. It's what I've been doing for 3 years. She stood abruptly, her face hardening again. Fine. You want a fight? I'll give you one. I'll get a lawyer. A good one. And we'll see what a judge thinks about you trying to steal someone's children. I'm not stealing them, I repeated, exhausted by the conversation going in circles. I'm caring for them. There's a difference. She left without saying goodbye, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. I sat in the silence that followed, shaking slightly from the adrenaline. A small sound made me turn. Cody stood in the hallway, still in his pajamas, eyes wide. Is Mom taking us away? He asked, his voice trembling. I crossed to him quickly, kneeling so we were eye level. No, sweetheart. Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. I promise. I heard yelling, he said. Is she mad at you? She's upset, I said carefully. Grown-up stuff is complicated sometimes. But you're safe here, okay? You and your sisters and Parker. Nothing's changing that. He nodded slowly, then wrapped his arms around my neck in a fierce hug. I don't want to leave. Then you won't, I whispered into his hair, praying I could keep that promise. The next morning, I called Gerald Pineda's office before I'd even had coffee. His receptionist put me through immediately, sensing the urgency in my voice. Bridget knows, I said as soon as he answered. She showed up last night. It got ugly. Did she threaten you or the children? His tone shifted to something more alert. No, nothing like that. Just a lot of anger and accusations. She says she's getting a lawyer. Good, Gerald said, surprising me. If she hires representation, it means she's taking this seriously. That actually works better than if she tried to represent herself and made a mess of things. Did you document the interaction? I thought about the timeline in my head, the way Bridget had stormed in unannounced. She used a key she shouldn't still have to enter my home without permission while the children were sleeping. Does that matter? Yes, he said. Change your locks today. If she tries to enter again without your consent, that's trespassing. Also, I want you to start keeping a detailed log. Every interaction with her, every text message, every call. Dates, times, what was said. The more documentation we have, the stronger our position. I grabbed a notebook and started scribbling notes. She said I'm trying to steal her kids because I can't have my own. That this is about jealousy. Gerald was quiet for a moment. That's going to be her angle. She'll try to paint you as someone with an agenda, someone who manipulated the situation to get what you want. We need to counter that with facts. School records showing you've been the primary contact. Medical records listing you as the guardian who brings them to appointments. Financial records proving you've been paying for their care. Can you gather all of that? Yes, I said. Most of it I already have. The rest I can get. Then start compiling everything into a binder. Organized chronologically. I want to be able to open it and see exactly what life has looked like for these children over the past 3 years. Every time Bridget promised to pick them up and didn't. Every missed birthday. Every school event where you were the only adult present. Make it undeniable. We talked logistics for another 20 minutes. He explained that Bridget would have to file a response to my petition, laying out her objections. Then there would be a preliminary hearing where a judge would decide whether to grant temporary guardianship while the case proceeded. That hearing would happen in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks, I repeated. That's fast. Family court moves quickly when children are involved, Gerald said. Especially when there's a clear need for stability. The judge will likely interview the children, at least the older ones. They'll want to know where the kids want to be. My stomach twisted at the thought of Cody or Sienna having to talk to a judge. Will that be traumatic for them? It can be, he admitted. But judges who specialize in family law are trained to make it as gentle as possible. Usually, it's a conversation in chambers, very informal. They just want to understand the children's perspective. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by the detritus of breakfast. Cereal bowls with milk pooling in the bottom. A half-eaten piece of toast. Mila's sippy cup leaked purple juice onto a placemat. Normal morning chaos that now felt weighted with legal significance. Everything I did, every choice I made, could potentially be scrutinized in court. I spent my lunch break that day at the hardware store, buying new locks for all the exterior doors. The man who helped me pick them out was chatty, asking if I'd been broken into. I said something vague about wanting better security and left with a bag full of brass and keys. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I replaced every lock myself, following YouTube tutorials on my phone. My hands ached by the time I finished, and I'd skinned a knuckle trying to fit the deadbolt on the back door, but it felt good to have tangible control over something. Bridget's old key now opened nothing. The thought gave me a grim satisfaction. The following week crawled by. I waited for Bridget to show up again, to call, to send more angry messages. But after that first explosion, she went silent. No texts. No calls. Nothing. The quiet felt more ominous than her anger had. I kept checking my phone compulsively, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Meanwhile, I threw myself into documentation. I requested records from Lowell Elementary showing 3 years of parent-teacher conferences I'd attended alone. The school secretary, Mrs. Kim, gave me a sympathetic look when I explained what I needed them for. "You're the only one I've ever seen pick those kids up," she said quietly, printing everything out. "Whatever you're doing, I hope it works out." I got medical records from the pediatrician's office. Immunization histories with my signature on every form. Notes from sick visits and well-child checks, all listing me as the guardian present. The receptionist didn't ask questions, just handed over copies in a manila envelope. I compiled bank statements showing years of purchases at the grocery store, the pharmacy, the school supply store. I printed out receipts for dance classes and soccer registration fees. I pulled up my credit card statements and highlighted every charge related to the kids' care. The total amount made my head spin. I'd spent over $40,000 in the past 3 years on children who weren't legally mine. All of it went into a 3-ring binder with tabbed sections. Education. Medical. Financial. Housing. Daily care. Each section told the same story. I had been raising these children in every meaningful way while Bridget drifted in and out of their lives like weather. Aunt Lorraine came over one evening to help me organize everything. She sat at my dining table with reading glasses perched on her nose, going through documents with the precision of someone who'd spent 30 years as a paralegal before retiring. She didn't say much, just made small sounds of approval or disapproval as she reviewed each piece of evidence. "This is damning," she finally said, closing the binder. "Any judge who looks at this will see exactly what's been happening." "Is that enough?" I asked, unable to keep the worry from my voice. What if Bridget shows up to court with some sob story about how hard her life has been? What if the judge feels sorry for her? Lorraine fixed me with a look over her glasses. Family court judges have seen every sob story imaginable. They don't make decisions based on sympathy. They make them based on what's best for the children. And this, she tapped the binder, shows without question that you've been providing a stable, loving home while Bridget has been absent. "She'll say I encouraged her absence," I said. "That I made it easy for her to leave the kids with me." "Did you?" Lorraine asked bluntly. I thought about it honestly. I never turned them away. When she showed up with them, I took them in. But I didn't offer to keep them permanently. She just kept not coming back. "That's not encouragement," Lorraine said. "That's you being a safety net while she repeatedly failed to catch her own children. There's a difference." We worked until past midnight, making copies of everything, organizing papers into clear protective sleeves. Lorraine helped me draft a written statement explaining the history of the situation, a narrative to accompany the evidence. We went through revision after revision until it felt true and clear without being vindictive. By the time she left, I had a case file that looked professional and thorough. Gerald would be pleased. The thought should have comforted me, but instead, I felt hollow. This wasn't how family was supposed to work. We weren't supposed to need lawyers and court dates and evidence binders. We were supposed to love each other and figure things out together. But Bridget had made that impossible years ago. She'd chosen her path, and I'd been left to clean up after her choices. Now I was just making it official. 2 days before the preliminary hearing, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A woman's voice came through, professional and clipped. "Miss Hartley? This is Diana Ostroff from Beacon Family Law. I've been retained by your sister, Bridget Donovan, regarding the guardianship matter." My mouth went dry. Okay. I wanted to reach out before the hearing to see if we might come to an agreement outside of court. My client is willing to consider shared custody arrangements or supervised visitation parameters that would allow both of you to be involved in the children's lives. I closed my eyes, trying to parse the legal language. Supervised visitation means Bridget would only see them with someone else present? That's one option we're exploring, Diana said carefully. My client recognizes there have been challenges, but she's committed to maintaining a relationship with her children while respecting the stability you've provided. It sounded reasonable. Measured. Exactly what a good lawyer would propose to make their client seem cooperative and willing to compromise. But underneath the professional language, I heard what wasn't being said. Bridget knew she was going to lose if this went to a full hearing. "I need to discuss this with my attorney," I said. "Of course. I'll have my office send over a formal proposal. Perhaps we can arrange mediation before the hearing date." After she hung up, I immediately called Gerald. He listened to my summary of the conversation, then asked me to forward any written proposal Diana sent over. "She's trying to avoid having her client's history fully exposed in court," he said. "Which means the evidence you've gathered is strong enough that they're worried." "Is that good?" I asked. "It's very good," he confirmed. "But don't agree to anything until we review it thoroughly. Shared custody can mean a lot of different things, and we need to make sure any arrangement actually serves the children's best interests, not just Bridget's desire to maintain legal rights she hasn't been exercising." The proposal arrived via email that afternoon. I read it 3 times, trying to understand all the clauses and stipulations. Essentially, Bridget would agree to me having primary physical custody while maintaining joint legal custody. She'd have visitation every other weekend and 1 evening per week, supervised initially by Aunt Lorraine until she could demonstrate consistent follow-through. I would make all day-to-day decisions, but major choices about education and medical care would require both of our consent. On paper, it looked fair. But something about it nagged at me. Joint legal custody meant Bridget could still block decisions I wanted to make. She could refuse to sign off on medical procedures or school choices out of spite. She could maintain control without any of the responsibility. I called Aunt Lorraine, reading her the proposal over the phone. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. "What does your gut tell you?" she finally asked. "That she's trying to have it both ways," I said. "Keep her parental rights without actually parenting." "Then trust your gut," Lorraine said. "You know Bridget better than any lawyer does. If you think she'll use joint custody as a weapon, she probably will." That night, I lay awake thinking about it. Part of me wanted to accept the proposal, to avoid the ugliness of a court battle. To let Bridget maintain some dignity and connection to her children. But I kept coming back to what Cody had said, "It's easier here because I always know what's going to happen next." That's what these kids needed. Certainty. Not an arrangement where decisions got bottlenecked by a mother who'd already proven she couldn't be relied upon. In the morning, I emailed Gerald my decision. I was declining the proposal. We'd go forward with the hearing as scheduled. His response came back quickly, "Understood. See you in court." The courthouse felt different on hearing day. Colder somehow, despite the spring sunshine streaming through the tall windows. I'd dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that said responsible and stable without trying too hard. Navy pants, a cream blouse, minimal jewelry. Aunt Lorraine met me in the lobby, wearing her best suit and carrying a leather folder that gave her an air of authority even though she wasn't testifying. Gerald was already waiting outside the courtroom, reviewing notes on his tablet. He looked up when we approached and gave me a reassuring nod. Ready? I wasn't, but I said yes anyway. Through the courtroom doors, I could see Bridget sitting at the opposite table with her attorney, Diana Ostroff. Bridget had clearly been coached on appearance. Her hair was pulled back neatly, makeup subtle, and she wore a modest dress I'd never seen before. She looked like someone's idea of what a responsible mother should look like. Troy sat beside her, equally cleaned up, his tattooed arms covered by a button-down shirt. We took our seats at the petitioner's table. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room with a judge's bench at one end. A few other people sat in the gallery, probably waiting for their own cases. The clerk called the room to order, and Judge Patricia Westmore entered, her black robe swishing as she took her seat. She was younger than I'd anticipated, maybe early 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the case file for what felt like an eternity before looking up. This is a preliminary hearing regarding the petition for guardianship filed by Vanessa Hartley concerning 4 minor children. Ms. Hartley, you're seeking to formalize an arrangement you allege has existed informally for approximately 3 years. Ms. Donovan, you're objecting to this petition. Is that correct? Both lawyers affirmed. Judge Westmore nodded. Let's start with the petitioner. Mr. Pineda, present your case. Gerald stood, and for the next 20 minutes, he laid out everything. The timeline of Bridget's absences. The documentation showing I'd been the primary caregiver. The financial records proving I'd supported the children. He spoke clearly and methodically, building a picture so comprehensive that by the time he finished, the pattern was undeniable. He entered the binder I'd compiled as evidence, and Judge Westmore began flipping through it, her expression growing more serious with each page. Then Diana Ostroff stood for the defense. She painted a different picture entirely. Bridget was a struggling single mother who'd made mistakes, yes, but who'd always intended for the arrangement with me to be temporary. She'd been dealing with postpartum depression after Mila's birth, financial hardship after Troy's legal troubles, and a series of unfortunate circumstances that had made it difficult to resume full-time care. But she loved her children deeply and wanted to be reunited with them. Ms. Hartley has been an invaluable support to my client during this difficult period, Diana said smoothly. But the petitioner has overstepped by attempting to formalize guardianship without my client's genuine consent. This appears to be a case of good intentions becoming boundary violations. I felt my jaw clench. Boundary violations. As if I'd been the one who'd crossed lines, not Bridget who'd dumped her children on my doorstep repeatedly without warning. Judge Westmore held up a hand. Ms. Ostroff, your client sent the children to live with Ms. Hartley for extended periods. Multiple times. Over 3 years. At what point does temporary assistance become de facto custody? Diana didn't miss a beat. My client maintains that she always intended to resume care once her circumstances stabilized. She's been in regular contact with the children. Define regular, the judge said, flipping through the evidence binder. Because according to these phone records, Ms. Donovan went 73 days without contacting her children last winter. That's over 2 months. Bridget's face crumpled. I watched her lean into Troy, who put his arm around her shoulders. She was crying now, visible even from across the room. Diana placed a comforting hand on her client's arm before responding. Your Honor, my client was dealing with severe depression during that period. She felt she couldn't be the mother her children deserved in that mental state, so she allowed them to remain with family rather than expose them to her struggles. It was a good answer. Sympathetic. It reframed neglect as self-sacrifice. I could see the judge considering it, her expression softening slightly. Then Gerald stood again. Your Honor, if I may. Depression is a serious condition, and we don't wish to minimize Ms. Donovan's struggles. However, being unable to care for children due to mental health challenges doesn't negate the children's need for stable guardianship. Ms. Donovan has made no documented effort to seek treatment, establish consistent employment, or create a stable living environment. She's currently 4 months pregnant with her 5th child while unable to care for the 4 she already has. Diana objected immediately. The pregnancy is irrelevant to this proceeding. It's relevant to the question of whether my client can provide stability, Gerald countered. Ms. Donovan's pattern suggests she'll continue to rely on Ms. Hartley to raise her children while maintaining legal authority over them. That's not co-parenting. That's exploitation of familial goodwill. Judge Westmore raised her hand again. Let's hear from the children. I'd like to speak with them individually in chambers. Mr. Pineda, Ms. Ostroff, you'll both be present, but I want this to feel like a conversation, not an interrogation. We'll start with the oldest. My heart lurched. Cody. They were going to question Cody. I watched as the bailiff left to retrieve the kids from the waiting room where Aunt Lorraine's friend had been supervising them. Gerald had warned me this might happen, had even prepared Cody for the possibility, but knowing it and watching it unfold were two different things. Cody entered the courtroom looking small in his button-up shirt and khaki pants. He saw me and his face brightened momentarily before confusion took over as he realized the formal setting. The bailiff guided him toward the judge's chambers, and I had to resist every instinct to follow. The door closed behind them, and I was left in the courtroom with Bridget and the lawyers, all of us suspended in awful silence. 20 minutes passed. Then Sienna was called in. Then Parker. Mila was deemed too young to provide meaningful input. Each child disappeared behind that door, and each time I felt a piece of my heart go with them. What were they being asked? Were they scared? Did they understand what was happening? When Parker finally emerged and was escorted back to the waiting room, Judge Westmore returned to the bench. Her expression was unreadable. She looked at both tables, then down at her notes, then back up. I've spoken with 3 of the 4 children, she began. And their testimony is remarkably consistent. They all expressed a clear preference to remain in Ms. Hartley's care. The oldest child, Cody, was particularly articulate about feeling more secure in his aunt's home. He used the word stable multiple times. Sienna expressed anxiety about moving but said she missed her mother. Parker mostly talked about his rock collection but indicated he didn't want to leave Ms. Hartley's house. Bridget was crying harder now, her shoulders shaking. Troy kept his arm around her but his face was stony. I felt a confusing mix of relief and guilt. The kids had chosen me, but that choice would devastate their mother. Judge Westmore continued. This is clearly a complicated situation. Ms. Donovan, I don't doubt that you love your children. But love alone doesn't constitute adequate parenting. The evidence suggests a pattern of inconsistent care and unreliable follow-through. Ms. Hartley has stepped into a void you created, whether intentionally or due to circumstances beyond your control. She paused, reviewing her notes again. However, I'm not prepared to permanently terminate parental rights at this stage. What I'm going to do is grant temporary guardianship to Ms. Hartley for a period of 6 months. During that time, Ms. Donovan, you will have supervised visitation twice per month. You will also be required to complete a parenting evaluation and demonstrate consistent employment and stable housing. At the end of 6 months, we'll reconvene and assess whether the temporary arrangement should become permanent or whether you've made sufficient progress to resume a more active parenting role. Diana stood immediately. Your Honor, my client requests more frequent visitation. Twice per month is insufficient to maintain a meaningful parent-child relationship. Your client went over 2 months without any contact last winter, Judge Westmore said dryly. Twice per month supervised visits is generous given that history. If Ms. Donovan demonstrates consistent follow-through during this 6-month period, we can discuss increasing visitation at the next hearing. She looked at Bridget directly. Ms. Donovan, I'm giving you an opportunity to prove you can be the parent these children need. Don't waste it. The gavel came down. The hearing was over. I sat there stunned, trying to process what had just happened. Temporary guardianship. 6 months. It wasn't the full permanent guardianship I'd hoped for, but it was something. Legal protection. Authority to make decisions. And most importantly, the kids would stay with me. Gerald leaned over, speaking quietly. This is a good outcome. Temporary guardianship almost always becomes permanent if the parent doesn't make significant changes. And based on Bridget's history, she won't. Across the room, Bridget was having a meltdown. Diana was trying to calm her down, but Bridget was sobbing loudly enough that people in the gallery were staring. Troy looked overwhelmed, clearly unsure how to handle his girlfriend's distress. I felt a stab of sympathy despite everything. This was her worst fear realized, her children legally removed from her care, even if only temporarily. I stood to leave, but Bridget's voice stopped me. This is your fault. She was pointing at me, mascara running down her face. You poisoned them against me. You told them to say those things to the judge. I never coached them, I said quietly. They told the truth. They're children. They don't know what they want. You manipulated them. Her voice was getting louder, more hysterical. The bailiff moved closer, ready to intervene if necessary. Diana put a firm hand on Bridget's arm. This isn't helping. Let's discuss next steps in my office. But Bridget shook her off. You stole my family. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're taking the only good things I ever made. The bailiff stepped between us. Ma'am, you need to calm down or I'll have to ask you to leave. Troy finally stirred, pulling Bridget back. Babe, come on. Let's go. He shot me a look that was equal parts anger and exhaustion, then physically guided Bridget toward the exit. Diana followed, apologizing to the court for the outburst. When they were gone, I felt my legs go weak. Aunt Lorraine appeared at my side, steadying me with a hand on my elbow. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. Is it always like this? Family court is never easy, Gerald said, packing up his briefcase. But you did well. The judge saw through the performance and focused on what matters, which is the children's well-being. The temporary guardianship order will be filed today, and you'll receive official documentation within the week. We walked out of the courthouse together into brilliant sunshine that felt incongruous with the heaviness of the morning. Aunt Lorraine had driven separately, so she headed toward her car with a promise to check in later. Gerald shook my hand and reminded me to call if any issues came up during the transition period. I drove to Aunt Lorraine's friend's house to pick up the kids. They were playing in the backyard when I arrived, seemingly unbothered by the morning's events. Cody looked up when he saw me and came running over. Did we do okay? He asked anxiously. When we talked to the judge. I knelt down and pulled him into a hug. You did perfectly. You just told the truth, and that's all anyone can ask. Are we in trouble? Sienna appeared at my other side, her face worried. No, sweetheart. Nobody's in trouble. We're just making sure everyone knows where you're going to live so there's no confusion. Parker wandered over, holding a new rock he'd found in the garden. Can we go home now? I'm hungry. Home. He'd called my house home. The simple statement hit me harder than any legal ruling. This was their home. I was their home. Whatever happened in the next 6 months or beyond, that fundamental truth wouldn't change. We stopped for burgers on the way back, a celebration of sorts, though I'm not sure the kids fully understood what we were celebrating. They just knew we weren't rushing, that I seemed less tense than I had in days, and that I'd said yes to milkshakes without the usual negotiation about sugar before dinner. At home, life resumed its normal rhythm. Homework and baths and bedtime stories. But I kept checking my phone compulsively, waiting for angry messages from Bridget or some other crisis to erupt. Instead, there was silence. Diana had probably told her to cease all direct contact, to let the lawyers handle communication. It should have been a relief, but the quiet felt ominous. 3 days later, the official guardianship order arrived by mail. A manila envelope containing legal documents that spelled out my rights and responsibilities in formal language. I was now Cody, Sienna, Parker, and Mila's legal guardian for the next 6 months. I could make medical decisions, educational choices, and have full authority over their daily care. Bridget retained limited parental rights but couldn't remove them from my care or make major decisions without my consent. I read through it twice, then filed it carefully in the binder I'd created. This changed everything and nothing simultaneously. The kids were already here, already in my care. But now there was a legal framework around it. Protection. Authority. Recognition. That weekend, Bridget had her first supervised visitation at a neutral location, a family center designed for exactly these situations. Aunt Lorraine had agreed to be the supervisor, mainly because I couldn't bear the thought of being in the room watching Bridget interact with the kids while Troy hovered awkwardly. Lorraine had dealt with enough family dysfunction in her life not to be rattled by it. I drove the kids to the center, a cheerful building painted yellow with a playground out front. Cody was quiet in the car, Sienna chattered nervously about nothing, and Parker asked if they could go to the park after. Only Mila seemed unaffected, singing a song she'd learned at daycare about butterflies. Bridget was already inside when we arrived. She'd clearly been crying, her eyes red and puffy. But she managed a smile when she saw the kids, dropping to her knees and opening her arms. Mila ran to her immediately. Parker followed more slowly. Sienna hesitated, then went in for a hug. Cody stayed back, giving a small wave from near my side. "Hey babies," Bridget said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've missed you so much." I felt like an intruder watching the reunion. Aunt Lorraine appeared and gestured for me to leave. "I've got this. Come back in 2 hours." 2 hours. I had 2 free hours with no kids and nowhere I needed to be. The novelty of it felt strange. I drove aimlessly for a while, ending up at Wright Park where I'd taken the kids countless times. I sat on a bench near the pond, watching ducks paddle in circles, and tried to untangle how I felt. Relief that the hearing was over. Guilt that Bridget was clearly devastated. Fear that 6 months wasn't enough time to prove this arrangement should be permanent. Exhaustion from years of carrying weight I'd never asked for. And underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness for 4 kids who'd become mine in every way that mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Diana Ostroff. I wanted to inform you that my client plans to comply fully with the court's requirements. She's enrolled in parenting classes and has begun therapy. She's also secured part-time employment. I hope we can maintain professional courtesy as we move through this process." I stared at the message, trying to read between the lines. Was this genuine effort from Bridget, or was Diana managing expectations? Either way, I responded professionally. "Thank you for letting me know. I want what's best for the children, and if that includes a healthy relationship with their mother, I support it." It was the truth, even if it complicated things. I didn't want to be the villain in Bridget's story or the children's. I just wanted them safe and stable. If Bridget could actually get her life together, that would be better for everyone. But I wasn't holding my breath. When I returned to the family center, Aunt Lorraine met me in the lobby looking worn out. "How'd it go?" I asked. "About what you'd expect," she said. Lots of crying from Bridget. The kids were confused. Troy barely said a word the whole time. But they made it through without incident, which is what matters. The kids emerged looking subdued. Even Parker, usually unflappable, seemed quieter than normal. Bridget appeared in the doorway behind them, watching as they walked toward me. Our eyes met across the lobby. For just a moment, I saw past her anger to something more complicated. Grief, maybe. Or recognition that she'd lost something she could never fully get back. Then the moment passed and she turned away, Troy's arm around her shoulders as they left through a different exit. In the car, nobody spoke for the first few minutes. Then Sienna asked, "Is Mom mad at us?" "No, honey," I said immediately. "She's not mad at you. She's sad about some grown-up stuff, but none of it is your fault." "She cried a lot," Parker observed matter-of-factly. Sometimes adults cry when they're sad, I said. That's okay. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. Cody stared out the window, saying nothing. I caught his eye in the rearview mirror and saw worry etched into his young face. Later, after the others were in bed, he appeared in my doorway again. Can I ask you something? His voice was small. Always. If Mom gets better, do we have to go back? The question gutted me. Would you want to? He thought about it seriously. I love Mom. But I don't want to leave here. Everything's easier here. I don't have to worry about stuff. I patted the bed beside me and he climbed up, settling against my shoulder. Nobody's going to make you do anything that doesn't feel safe. I promise. You can't promise that, he said with the brutal honesty of a 9-year-old. The judge decides, not you. He was right, of course. I couldn't make promises about things outside my control. You're right. I can't guarantee what will happen. But I can promise that I'll fight for what's best for you and your sisters and Parker. And right now, the judge agreed that staying here is best. That might change, but not easily. Okay? He nodded against my shoulder, and we sat there in comfortable silence until his breathing evened out into sleep. I eased him off my shoulder and tucked him into the guest bed I kept made up for exactly these moments when one of the kids needed extra comfort. Standing in the doorway watching him sleep, I thought about the next 6 months. The continued visitations with Bridget. The parenting evaluations and therapy sessions and all the hoops she'd have to jump through. The eventual hearing where a judge would decide if temporary became permanent. And I thought about the new baby coming. Baby number 5 that Bridget seemed to believe would fix everything, would make her into the mother she'd never managed to be for the first 4. I wondered who would end up raising that child when the newborn phase wore off and reality set in. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, I had 4 kids sleeping peacefully under my roof, legal guardianship papers filed away in a binder, and 6 months to prove that stability mattered more than biology. It would have to be enough. The 6 months passed in a blur of routines and small victories. Spring melted into summer, school let out, and the kids settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly permanent. Cody joined Little League, Sienna took swimming lessons at the community pool, Parker collected enough rocks to start his own geological museum in the garage, and Mila learned to pedal a tricycle without training wheels. These were the mundane milestones that made up a childhood, and I was there for every single one. Bridget attended her supervised visitations with surprising consistency at first. She showed up on time, brought small gifts, tried to engage with the kids in the limited 2-hour windows. But by month 3, the cracks started showing. She missed a visitation because Troy's car broke down. Rescheduled another because she wasn't feeling well. Called 15 minutes before the 4th one to say she had a shift conflict at work she couldn't get out of. The pattern I'd seen for years was reasserting itself, predictable as weather. Aunt Lorraine documented everything in a log she kept specifically for this purpose. Arrival times, interaction quality, any concerning behavior. The kids' reactions after each visit went in there too. How Sienna would be clingy for a day afterward. How Cody would retreat into himself. How Parker seemed unaffected but would have nightmares. How Mila would ask when Mommy was coming back, then forget about it by dinner. In July, Bridget gave birth to a baby girl she named Harmony. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me. She posted photos on social media, Troy beaming beside her in the hospital room, the baby wrapped in a pink blanket. The comments section filled with congratulations and heart emojis. Nobody asked about the other 4 kids who weren't in the picture. I showed Cody and Sienna the photos because it felt wrong to keep them from knowing they had a new sister. Cody looked at the image for a long time before handing my phone back without comment. Sienna asked if we could visit the baby. I said we'd have to see. 2 weeks after Harmony's birth, Diana Ostroff called me directly. Her tone was different than before, less adversarial and more tired. Ms. Hartley, I wanted to give you a heads up. My client has missed 3 consecutive therapy appointments and hasn't attended a parenting class in over a month. She's also behind on the visitation schedule. I wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed still felt like something heavy settling in my chest. Is she planning to show up for the permanency hearing? Diana was quiet for a moment. Between us, I'm not sure. She's overwhelmed with the new baby. Troy's been inconsistent with employment. Their living situation is unstable. I've advised her that the court is unlikely to rule in her favor given her lack of follow-through, but she's not in a place to hear that right now. What are you saying? I asked, though I already knew. I'm saying you should prepare for the possibility that she won't contest permanent guardianship when we go back to court next month. Off the record, I think that would be the best outcome for everyone involved, especially the children. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the elementary school parking lot where I'd taken the call during my lunch break. The finality of it washed over me. This was really happening. For children who'd arrived in my life as temporary guests were about to become permanent residents. Not through some dramatic courtroom battle, but through Bridget's quiet surrender to the reality she'd spent years avoiding. I called Gerald that evening after the kids were asleep. He listened to my summary of the conversation with Diana, then said what I'd been thinking. If she doesn't contest, the judge will likely grant permanent guardianship at the hearing. You should start thinking about next steps. Whether you want to pursue adoption, how you'll handle ongoing contact with Bridget, all of it. Adoption. The word felt enormous. It meant more than guardianship, more than just legal authority. It meant severing Bridget's parental rights entirely. Making these kids mine not just in practice but in law. Changing their last names if I wanted. Having the ability to make every decision about their lives without consulting anyone. I need to think about it, I said. And I need to talk to the kids, at least Cody. He's old enough to have an opinion about something this permanent. That weekend, I took Cody out for ice cream, just the two of us. We sat at a picnic table outside the shop, sticky summer heat making our cones drip faster than we could eat them. He was working on a double scoop of mint chocolate chip, concentrating intensely on keeping it from sliding off the cone. Can I ask you something important? I said, when he'd achieved equilibrium with his ice cream. He looked up, suddenly wary. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. I just need to know how you feel about some things. I chose my words carefully. You know how you've been living with me for a long time now, and the court said you could stay? He nodded, licking melted ice cream off his hand. Well, next month there's another hearing. The judge is going to decide if you staying with me should be permanent. Not just for 6 months, but forever. Or at least until you're grown up. Cody was quiet, thinking it through with the seriousness he brought to everything. What about Mom? She'd still be your mom, I said. But I'd be your legal guardian, which means I'd make all the decisions about school and doctors and stuff. You could still see her if you wanted to. Do we have to see her? The question was soft but clear. I hadn't expected that. You don't want to? He shrugged, attacking his ice cream again. It's hard. Every time we see her, she promises things will be different, that she'll take us to do fun stuff or come to my games. But she never does. It makes me feel bad, like I did something wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, I said firmly. Your mom loves you, but she has a hard time following through on promises. That's about her, not you. I know, he said, but his voice suggested he didn't quite believe it. Sienna still wants to see her. She cries sometimes at night and says she misses Mom. But I don't miss it. I like knowing you'll be there when you say you will. It's just easier. There was that word again. Easier. Not better or happier, though I hoped he felt those things too. Just easier, meaning predictable and stable and safe. For a kid who'd spent his early years in chaos, that mattered more than grand gestures or emotional proclamations. If the judge makes it permanent, would you be okay with that? I asked. He nodded immediately. Yeah. Can Sienna and Parker and Mila stay too? That's the plan, I assured him. All 4 of you together. Good. He'd finished his ice cream and was working on the cone now. Are you going to adopt us? Like really adopt us? Would you want that? He considered it, crunching through the cone thoughtfully. Would we have the same last name as you? You could if you wanted. Or you could keep your last name. It would be up to you. I think I'd want the same last name, he said. So people know we're really a family, not just temporary. I felt tears prick my eyes and blinked them back. We're already really a family, buddy. The names would just make it official. He smiled at that, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. Okay then. I think you should adopt us. The permanency hearing was scheduled for late August, just before school started. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I kept playing through possible scenarios. What if Bridget showed up and made a compelling case for why she deserved another chance? What if the judge decided 6 months wasn't enough time to evaluate her progress? What if Troy stood up and said they'd fixed everything and wanted their kids back? But when morning came and we arrived at the courthouse, neither Bridget nor Troy were anywhere to be seen. Diana Ostroff stood outside the courtroom alone, looking professionally apologetic. She approached as soon as she saw me. My client isn't coming, she said without preamble. She called this morning and said she can't do it. Can't face the judge, can't watch the proceedings. She's asked me to inform the court that she's not contesting permanent guardianship. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad for Bridget, who loved her kids but couldn't figure out how to be what they needed. Sad for the kids, who'd one day have to reckon with the fact that their mother chose to walk away rather than fight for them. Sad for the whole broken situation that had led us here. What about Troy? I asked. Diana shook her head. He was never listed as father on any of the birth certificates except Mila's. He has no legal standing to contest anything. Inside the courtroom, Judge Westmore reviewed the case file with the same meticulous attention she'd shown at the first hearing. She noted Bridget's inconsistent attendance at therapy and parenting classes. The missed visitations. The lack of progress towards stable housing or employment. Then she looked at my file, which Gerald had updated to show 6 months of consistent care. School enrollment papers. Medical records. A letter from Cody's Little League coach talking about what a difference stable home life had made in his confidence. Another from Sienna's swim instructor noting similar improvement. Ms. Hartley, the judge said, you've provided these children with stability and care during a difficult period. The reports indicate they're thriving in your home. Ms. Donovan has chosen not to appear today and has indicated through her attorney that she's not contesting this petition. Given all of that, I'm prepared to grant permanent guardianship. She paused, looking directly at me. However, I want to be clear about what this means. Permanent guardianship gives you legal authority over these children, but it doesn't terminate parental rights. Ms. Donovan remains their mother legally. If you wish to pursue adoption at some point, that would require a separate petition and would permanently terminate her rights. Do you understand the distinction? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Good. She signed several documents, the scratch of her pen loud in the quiet courtroom. Permanent guardianship is granted effective immediately. Ms. Hartley, you now have full legal authority to make all decisions regarding these children's welfare, education, and medical care. Congratulations, and good luck. The gavel came down. It was over. Just like that, for children who'd wandered into my life through their mother's chaos were now mine permanently. Gerald shook my hand, Aunt Lorraine hugged me in the hallway, and Diana offered her professional congratulations before disappearing to deal with her next case. I drove straight from the courthouse to pick up the kids from the neighbor who'd been watching them. They tumbled into the car with their usual noise and energy, fighting over the radio station. I waited until we were home, until they were settled with snacks at the kitchen table, before I told them. So I have some news, I said, sitting down with them. I went to court today, and the judge said you're staying with me permanently. Not just for a while, but for always. Sienna's face crumpled immediately. We can't see Mom anymore? You can see her whenever you want, I assured her quickly. This just means you don't have to worry about where you're going to live. You live here now. This is your home. Parker looked up from the apple slices he was arranging into a pattern. Does this mean we get to stay in our rooms? I don't have to pack my stuff? You never have to pack your stuff, I said, my throat tight. All your things stay right where they are. Cody met my eyes across the table, and I saw relief written plainly on his face. He'd been carrying the weight of uncertainty for too long. Now it was lifted. What about the adoption thing? He asked. Sienna's head whipped toward him. What adoption thing? I took a breath. If you guys wanted, we could make this even more official. I could legally adopt you, which would mean I'd be your mom in the eyes of the law. But that's a big decision, and you'd all need to be okay with it. And it would mean your birth mom wouldn't have legal rights anymore. Would we call you Mom? Parker asked, the question coming out of nowhere. I hadn't even thought about that. You could call me whatever you're comfortable with. Some kids call their adoptive parents Mom or Dad, some use first names. It would be up to you. Mila, who'd been coloring through this entire conversation, looked up. I already call you Nessa. Can I keep calling you Nessa? Of course you can, baby. Sienna was crying now, not from sadness but from overwhelm. I don't want to stop being Mom's daughter. I pulled her into my lap, even though she was getting too big for it. You'll never stop being her daughter. Adoption would just mean I'd be your legal parent, the one who takes care of everything. But nobody can take away the fact that she's your mom and you love her. That doesn't change. Can we think about it? Cody asked, mature beyond his years. Absolutely. We don't have to decide anything today. Or even this year. We have all the time in the world now. That seemed to satisfy them. The conversation drifted to other topics, school starting soon, whether we should get a dog, if they could have a sleepover with friends. Normal kid concerns that had nothing to do with court dates or custody battles. I let them chatter, feeling something unwind in my chest that had been coiled tight for years. That evening, after everyone was asleep, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine and called Bridget. I'd been putting it off, unsure what to say, but it felt wrong not to reach out. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick like she'd been crying or sleeping or both. Vanessa. My name came out flat. I wanted to let you know the hearing happened today. I have permanent guardianship now. Silence on the other end. Then, I know. Diana called. The kids are okay, I said, because that seemed like the most important thing. They're doing well. School starts next week, and they're excited about their classes. That's good. Her voice was so small I barely recognized it. Bridget, they still want to see you. Sienna especially. You're still their mom. This doesn't have to mean you're cut out of their lives. She let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. How am I supposed to show up now? Knowing I failed so badly that the court took them away? The court didn't take them away, I said gently. You let them go years ago. All the court did was acknowledge reality. That's worse, she whispered. At least if they'd been taken, I could blame someone else. But this is on me. I know that. I didn't know what to say to that. It was true, and there was no comfort in pretending otherwise. What are you going to do? I don't know. Focus on harmony, I guess. Try to do better with her than I did with them. She paused. Will you send pictures sometimes? Of the kids? I don't want to lose track of them growing up. I can do that, I said. And when you're ready, we can arrange visits. Not through the court system, just family visits. When you're ready. Maybe, she said, but it sounded like no. I should go. Harmony's crying. The line went dead. I sat there listening to the cicadas and the distant sound of cars passing and tried to figure out how I felt. Not triumphant. Not even particularly relieved. Just tired and sad and grateful all at once. Inside, my house was full of sleeping children who were now mine to raise. For whole people who would need me for years to come. Who would have good days and bad days, successes and failures, joy and heartbreak. Who would remember this time in their lives, the year their aunt became their guardian, for better or worse. I thought about adoption, about making it even more permanent. About changing last names and having final legal say over everything. Part of me wanted that certainty, that absolute claim. But another part wondered if it was necessary. We were already a family in every way that mattered. Maybe the legal label didn't matter as much as what we built together day by day. Those were questions for another time. Tonight, I was just grateful for the quiet house and the children sleeping soundly upstairs and the fact that we'd all made it through something hard together. 3 months later, as fall settled in and leaves turned golden, Sienna asked if we could visit Bridget and meet baby Harmony. I'd been waiting for one of them to ask, knowing it would come eventually. We arranged it carefully, a neutral location, Aunt Lorraine present just in case. Bridget showed up looking better than she had in the courthouse, her hair neat, makeup done, the baby bundled in a carrier against her chest. The kids were shy at first, hanging back near me. But Sienna approached slowly, looking at the baby with wonder. She's so small. You were that small once, Bridget said, her voice soft. All of you were. Mila wanted to touch the baby's hand. Parker asked if the baby could play yet. Cody hung back, watching everything with careful eyes. The visit lasted an hour, awkward but not hostile. Bridget didn't make promises she couldn't keep. She didn't beg for forgiveness or try to explain away her choices. She just spent time with her kids and let them meet their sister. When we left, Sienna held my hand tight in the parking lot. That was nice. Can we do it again sometime? If you want to, I said. We can do whatever you're comfortable with. I want to, she said firmly. She's still my mom, even if you're the one who takes care of us. That felt right. Not perfect, not without complications, but right. Bridget would always be their biological mother, the person who'd given them life even if she couldn't figure out how to raise them. I was the one who'd stepped in, who'd built a home and a life around their needs. Both things could be true at once. By December, the adoption question came up again. Cody brought it home after a career day at school where someone had talked about family law. He'd learned that guardianship could theoretically be challenged or dissolved, while adoption was permanent and irreversible. That night, he knocked on my bedroom door with his serious face on. I think we should do the adoption, he said without preamble. All of us. Even Sienna, and she still wants to see Mom sometimes. Because this way nobody can take us away ever. Nobody's going to take you away, I assured him. The guardianship is permanent. But adoption is more permanent, he insisted with 9-year-old logic. And I want the most permanent. I want to know for absolute sure. I couldn't argue with that. We had a family meeting, all 5 of us sitting around the dining table I'd bought specifically because it was big enough for everyone. I explained what adoption meant in language they could understand. That I'd legally become their parent. That their birth certificates would be amended. That they could change their last names to mine if they wanted. Cody voted yes immediately. Parker said okay like it was no big deal, though I suspected it meant more to him than he showed. Mila didn't really understand but said yes because her siblings did. Sienna was the holdout, worrying her bottom lip with her teeth. If we do adoption, does that mean we can't ever live with Mom again? She asked. It means I'd be your legal parent, I said carefully. But if, when you're older, you wanted to spend more time with your mom, we could figure that out. This isn't about keeping you away from her. It's about making sure you have stability and someone who's legally responsible for you. She thought about it for a long time, so long the others got restless and started fidgeting. Finally, she nodded. Okay. But I want to tell Mom first. I don't want her to find out from someone else. That seemed fair. We arranged another visit, and Sienna, with all the courage of a 7-year-old, told Bridget that we were pursuing adoption. I watched Bridget's face carefully, ready to intervene if needed. But she just pulled Sienna into a hug and said, I think that's good, baby. Aunt Vanessa loves you so much. You're lucky to have her. It was possibly the most generous thing Bridget had ever said. A gift to her daughter and to me, permission to move forward without guilt. I met her eyes over Sienna's head and mouthed thank you. She nodded once, tears sliding down her cheeks. The adoption process took another 6 months. More paperwork, another hearing, home visits from social workers. But this time there was no opposition, no fight. Bridget signed the papers terminating her parental rights without contest. Troy, never officially a father to most of them anyway, had no standing to object. By the time summer rolled around again, exactly 2 years after that first guardianship hearing, we stood in front of Judge Westmore one final time. "This is my favorite kind of hearing," the judge said, smiling for the first time I'd ever seen. "When a family that formed through necessity becomes one through choice. Vanessa Hartley, you are now the legal parent of Cody, Sienna, Parker, and Mila. Congratulations." All 4 kids were there this time, dressed up and serious. When the judge asked if they understood what was happening, Cody answered for all of them. "We're becoming a real family." "You were always a real family," Judge Westmore said kindly. "This just makes it official." We took pictures on the courthouse steps afterward, all 5 of us squinting in the bright summer sun. Aunt Lorraine snapped photo after photo, declaring she needed at least 50 for her wall. The kids were giddy with the celebration of it all, though I suspected they didn't fully grasp what had changed. To them, today looked a lot like yesterday. They'd woken up in the same beds, eaten breakfast at the same table, lived in the same house with the same person taking care of them. But the paperwork in my bag said something different now. Said I was their mother, not their guardian. Said their last names were Hartley now, unless they decided to change them back when they were older. Said nobody could ever question my right to make decisions about their lives. That evening, we had a party. Nothing fancy, just pizza and cake in the backyard with a handful of friends who'd supported us through everything. The kids ran around catching fireflies while adults talked in low voices about how remarkable the whole situation was. Someone asked me if I felt different, now that the adoption was final. I watched Cody help Mila catch a firefly in a jar, watched Sienna and Parker argue over whose turn it was on the swing, and tried to articulate an answer. "I don't feel different," I said finally. "They've been mine for a long time. Today just gave us the paperwork to prove it." But that wasn't quite true. Something had shifted, something subtle but significant. A weight I'd been carrying without realizing it had lifted. The constant low-level anxiety that someone might take them away, that Bridget might show up and demand them back, that some legal technicality might unravel everything we'd built, it was gone. They were mine now, irrevocably and completely. Not because I'd stolen them or manipulated the situation, but because I'd shown up consistently when their mother couldn't. Because love manifested through daily care mattered more than biology alone. As night fell and the party wound down, I tucked each kid into bed for the first time as their legal mother. Mila fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the excitement. Parker wanted one more story, so I read about a dragon who learned to share his treasure. Sienna asked if we could visit Bridget next weekend and show her the adoption papers. I said yes, proud of her for wanting to include her birth mother in this moment even though it must have been confusing. Cody was last, as always. He lay in bed looking at the certificate the judge had given us, his finger tracing over where his new last name was printed in official typeface. "Do you think Mom's sad?" he asked. "Probably," I said honestly. "But I also think she knows you're where you need to be. And sometimes that's the most loving thing a parent can do, recognize when someone else can give their child what they can't." He nodded, setting the certificate carefully on his nightstand. "I'm glad you didn't give up on us. Even when it was hard." "I could never give up on you," I said, my voice thick. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, even if you came into my life in the strangest way possible." He smiled at that, then rolled over to sleep. I sat in his doorway for a long time, watching his breathing even out, thinking about the unlikely path that had brought us here. From an aunt who occasionally babysat to a guardian who provided temporary care to a mother who'd chosen these children as permanently as they'd chosen her. Somewhere across town, Bridget was probably holding baby Harmony and wondering if she'd get it right this time. I hoped she would. But if she didn't, if history repeated itself and she found herself overwhelmed and unable to cope, I knew what I'd do. I'd be here, door unlocked, space at the table, room in my heart for one more child who needed someone to show up consistently. Because that's what family did. Not the family you were born into, but the family you built through choice and commitment and the daily decision to keep showing up even when it was hard. I'd stumbled into this role reluctantly, resentful at first of the burden dropped in my lap. But somewhere along the way, these children had stopped being my sister's kids and become simply mine. My children. My family. My home. The house was quiet now, all 4 kids sleeping soundly. I made my way through the darkened rooms, checking locks and turning off lights, doing the final rounds every parent does before bed. In the kitchen, the adoption certificate sat in a neat stack on the counter, waiting to be framed. Legal proof of what my heart had known for a long time. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink, looking out at the backyard where fireflies still blinked in the darkness. 2 years ago, I'd stood in almost this exact spot, watching Bridget's face on a phone screen as she announced her 5th pregnancy from a Hawaiian beach. I'd felt trapped then, suffocated by responsibility I hadn't asked for. Now I felt something entirely different. Grateful. Purposeful. Complete. Not because the road had been easy. It hadn't. The court battles, the financial strain, the emotional exhaustion of supporting 4 traumatized kids through upheaval, all of that had been brutally hard. But we'd made it through together, and on the other side was something I'd never expected to have. A family that was mine not because of blood or obligation, but because we'd all chosen each other when it mattered most. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. School preparations, therapy appointments for Sienna who still struggled with abandonment, helping Cody navigate the social complexity of explaining his new last name to friends, all the ordinary and extraordinary demands of raising 4 kids. But tonight, I was just a mother standing in her kitchen, listening to the peaceful sounds of her children sleeping, and feeling more myself than I'd ever been. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.